what I hope we will leave you with today is some really good tools and knowledge when it comes to helping your organization build a business case to embark or implement a direct sourcing program. And of course, direct sourcing has been topical over the last 2 to 3 years. That's why we've been talking about it. But it's become important and it's become urgent. And it's become urgent and it's become important for two reasons. One is the talent scarcity that many of you guys are experiencing. We're experiencing it in our own organization. It's a common problem. And then the second one is, well, there's this labor market paradox out there. You've got millions of people unemployed, yet every single medium-sized large enterprise is hiring, and there's this mismatch in the labor market. So in our view, direct sourcing is something that can help solve that particular problem and challenge. Of course, it's only one thing in the armory of applications that can be used to solve the problem. So as I mentioned, we're joined by Katie Bussey. Katie is the president of IMS One World, a leading service provider when it comes to direct sourcing, talent marketing, talent branding, and building talent communities and talent pools. Katie's worked in the human capital sector for 24 years. Katie, I don't know how you've done it. You look bloody amazing. Thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Also joined by Jan-Willem Weijers. Jan has over 20 years experience in human capital, from procurement, talent acquisition, HR, all the good stuff, right? So as I mentioned, Jan-Willem is currently the global contingent program lead for Adevinta. Previous to that, he'd worked in AkzoNobel and one of the largest dairy company stroke producers in the world. I can never pronounce it, Jan-Willem, so that's the reason why I'm explaining it that way. And of course, my name is Connor Heaney. I'm your host for today. I'm the Managing Director at CXC Global EMEA. We're a leading global workforce solutions provider. And that's enough about me, because we're here to learn about how to build a direct sourcing business case. So we'll move on to our agenda. Thank you, Connor. Just some housekeeping before we begin. If you could keep your lines on mute, we would solely appreciate that. And if you have any questions, please direct them into the chat function. So we're going to look briefly at what is direct sourcing. For many of you guys, that will fail the so what test, so we're not going to labor on that today. We're going to launch into how we build a business case. And then we're going to look at stakeholders that you would need to focus on, critical success factors, KPIs, return on investment, what should constitute your talent network. And then we've put together a slide on direct sourcing providers, both technology platforms and providers, and also service providers. And of course, we appreciate many of our listeners might not be included in this, and we do realize there's other service providers and MSPs out there. So please drop us a note and we'll add you to the template that will go out. Also, next week, we will be sending each and every one of our audience today a business case template, which will allow you to help build out a business case for your organization should you want to do that. So hopefully you'll find that useful. We don't expect to cover every single point here in the limited time we have today, which is the reason why we want to send you that template. So hopefully you'll find that helpful. So what is direct sourcing? So what we're trying to do is make this really, really simple. So in our view, it's an enterprise talent strategy that leverages the organization's brand to source candidates directly for contingent or freelance workers. So in our view, there's a number of characteristics of this. Using your brand, I think the best direct sourcing programs that we've seen use your brand, the client's brand, the end user's brand. In our view, no brand, no success, right? So that's as simple as I can make it. Katie and Jan are laughing. We've got fulsome agreement, which is really, really good. Also, we're going to, of course, a key component is talent marketing and curation and what messaging and how frequent you want to send messages to your candidate pool, whether it's your candidate pool in your organization or out with or external to your organization. Every candidate is a customer, right? This is brilliant. And Jan-Willem's got a great phrase that I've used a lot over the years and borrowed. So I think, Jan-Willem, your phrase is, today's employee is tomorrow's freelancer. So it's really about what is your candidate value proposition, right? And that is
Exactly.
so for our listeners. And again, we're probably failing the so what test for the practitioners here, but for anyone that is embarking on this journey, and it is a journey, that's a key thing to consider. Of course, what services team you're going to select, what does that look like, where are they based, how are they going to do it? And then also, there's a number of direct sourcing or talent pool technology providers. So it's really about deploying the talent to underpin this initiative. And we'll come to that towards the end, but that is a really important thing to consider and to implement, because without the technology doing the work, this is a very labor intensive process, and you lack things like flexibility, single view, and the ability to match candidates with opportunity. And that's really what this is about, and the ability to do that at scale, and also with compliance and risk mitigation and all the other amazing things we're going to speak about today. So just some stats for you in the next slides, folks. So according to recent surveys, over 60% of buyers are considering embarking on a direct sourcing journey. As I mentioned, there's a talent scarcity, a war for talent, and a talent shortage. It's estimated that over 40 million jobs are unfulfilled worldwide. And of course, the trend is our friend when it comes to contingent workforce, with over 30% of the US workforce now contingent. So some key reasons here on the left-hand side to look at direct sourcing: reduced time to hire, reduced recruitment costs. I think unfairly though, direct sourcing has been used to unfairly compare itself with supplier sourcing. I think that's just one consideration these days, but it's really about getting top talent just in time, as opposed to last in time. So anyway, with that said, we're going to move on to the key components of business case. So Jan-Willem, over to you, and thank you.
Thanks, Connor, for having me at all, and hello to everybody listening. So really good to share my knowledge and just thoughts, and so there's no one size fits everybody, huh? So that you have to, as you have said already, so we have a definition of direct sourcing. If you want to change it for your company which fits better, go for it. But it starts, as you have said already, Connor, before building up this direct sourcing business case, you should definitely have answered the question yourself: why should I have this? So that's basically the problem. So why should I? Yeah, if you have a very good supply management and you're not able to build up a talent pool, so then's the problem that you first have to do your basics right. And then you can start with direct sourcing. So that's the why. I just want to briefly touch that, because it's not simply that you say on one day in your organization, well, I have some free time in my agenda, let's do direct sourcing. So, well, go for it, but it's never going to fly. So that's what I promised from my side, from an enterprise perspective. So basically, building up your business case, it at least you have to touch all the 6 points of thoughts. And so of course it starts with the problem. So if you have basically at the moment, it's a challenging to have direct access to your talent, because your suppliers are not able to provide you the right candidates with the right competences just in time. You need to think about, okay, I need to have a additional sourcing channel, which basically is direct access to talent. So, but of course, that's also the problem thing is, it's not only that you don't have enough access to talent, it's also about you want to mitigate risks, compliance. Of course, every county have its own regulation issues. And so sometimes you have to do it instead of through suppliers due to legislation. Well, if you have described or touched this problem, then you should have answered the why, and then you go to the next one, which is a proposed solution. And even here, that it's not that there is proposed just for a reason. So the reason that it is proposed, that you can view it from different kind of angles. And so there is no written in stone, or there's no one solution which is the best for you. It's just about, okay, what should I do? What kind of solution I will think about? Do I want to have only just a big database with all my freelancers or whatever, or should I connect also talent marketplaces to it? Do I want to have a kind of vacancy or assignment website connected to my recruitment tool? So you have different types of what kind of solution you want. That's also, of course, when you have this kind of solutions in your mind, that you should think about, okay, what kind of approach can I choose? So, and everything is related. So it's not that you need to start with one. So, of course, having the problem solved, that will be at least described. Maybe you can start with one, but then from there you can work on 2, 3, and 4 together, because involving your stakeholders from the beginning will help you in your adoption later on, and probably also including C-suite. Maybe we can talk about it later. So I think it's somewhere in the stakeholder sheet, but I don't want to talk about specifically on the stakeholders here. But what do you want to say something, Connor, about that?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, I'm sorry to interrupt you in full flow, but I was just thinking it might be helpful for our audience, and of course you don't need to divulge anything confidentially, but it's great to have someone from the client and buyer community here, because as I mentioned in your introduction, you've done this twice, right?
Yeah.
And in my view, you're quite far-sighted to do this, because in some cases that's a number of years ago, maybe 6, 7 years ago, and more recently with AXO. When you think about the why in those organizations, what were the key drivers that made you decide as the contingent workforce lead to say, do you know what?
Yeah.
I think bloody.
So very briefly, Connor. So we have, as I mentioned earlier. So first you need to have all your basics right. So you need to have a proper process. You need to have your rate cards implemented. You need to have a strategy around your suppliers and everything. And probably you should have a VMS. So that's one of the IT drivers. It doesn't matter what kind of, but when you're only working with Excel as a VMS and 1 or 2 recruiters, maybe you also you firstly need to think about, okay, maybe I can optimize a little bit this basically process, and then I will think about direct sourcing, because it is impacting your whole organization from different angles, which I can touch on later on. So that's why I started with the direct sourcing part. Is we first optimize the process, then we have supplier management, broker solution in place. We have an optimized rate card solution. Of course, there's some cost control already. And once you have everything with data and visible, then you can think about, okay, adding this direct sourcing strategy, sourcing channel, what's beneficial? So that's basically your value proposition. And of course, you need to have some critical success factors, but it's also talking to your stakeholders. Do we really want to reach out to the market to have this additional sourcing strategy? So it's not replacing your suppliers. It is just additional to it. As I said before in the last webinar already, when they introduced television, everybody was afraid that the newspapers will disappear. So they're still living next to each other. And that's also with direct sourcing. It's not replacing your current supplier base. And that's also something I want to say to suppliers as well. It's not from an enterprise perspective. Of course, procurement also want to have cost savings, or let's say it in a broader way, cost control. But it's also to have access to to your silver medalist, to someone who have worked for you with a very good NPS score. Managers will want to bring in their own network without the supplier, and then you have a broker solution that you can have them through, with which they are more neutral. That's also additional to your sourcing strategy. And if you want to choose that approach, just to say, hey guys, this is not, it's not your enemy, but let's fight together to get the right people on board on the right time. And of course, rate card management will help you to have a good price one way or the other. I think that's one of the critical success factors, and that's how I approached it. I involved stakeholders from the very early beginning, from procurement, from HR, from talent acquisition part, some business managers, people hiring quite a lot of people, sometimes in very hard industries. So, and let's say, okay, let's sit together and how should we define the business case or the why of this direct sourcing business case.
Yeah, and Jan, I really appreciate those insights, and I think our audience will too. And if we could just move on to looking at the stakeholders, because obviously involving the key stakeholders makes a lot of sense. You know, once you've got the business case, I suppose, you know, informally or formally, you want to bring these stakeholders on the journey. Some, I guess, Jan-Willem, you'll bring in at the early stages. So if you're in procurement, you might want to be talking to the contingent labor team or talent acquisition. You're probably getting pressure anyway from the hiring manager community saying, Jan-Willem, where the hell are my people? Right? We need it.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah, and procurement is knocking on the door. Can you deliver some savings? HR is saying, hey guys, where can I have my talent? From a legal perspective, that makes sense, of course. So yeah, basically you have to touch all of them. And as you said, so procurement, HR, and a hiring manager to start with, I think then you have a very nice group of people working together on the business case. But later on the process, you also need to involve marketing. If you want to have a microsite, you need to align with marketing about your brand. If you have built up an employee value proposition and you want to turn it into contractor value proposition, it at least need to be aligned. It can be slightly different, but building up on your own marketing brand already, that, yes, of course, they want to be involved. And from a legal compliance perspective, of course, when you have direct access to talent, it means that you also need to have, well, let's say a kind of broker solution in different countries to make sure that you will mitigate risk regarding some legal and compliance thing. So it's about tenure, it's about worker classification, of course. That's really very straightforward related. And of course, you need the system. So IT and security need to be, especially from a GDPR perspective. You're storing data from people, so of course they need to be involved as well. Of course, and hiring managers. From an enterprise perspective, you need them all. Sometimes some people you need very highly involved. Basically, C-suite. It could happen that they need to sign it off because you go to market with the brand. You're building up a brand strategy, so there needs to be at least informed about you want to do that. So basically, if they are sponsoring it, well, that's I think that will help you to get it fly. But they definitely need to be part of it, especially also. But if you have an MSP implemented, they of course need to be involved as well. Yes, yeah.
I will just say, Jan,
that's maybe something you can say something about it, Katie, because you're from a supplier solution perspective, you also have stakeholders outside in.
Exactly. So one thing, and I apologize not having my video on. My internet is unstable right now, so I'm just making sure I can be on the same time as you guys. So one thing I would say is that anyone who is newer to this concept on this line would look at this and go, oh my gosh, especially there's a lot of MSPs on this call right now. And if you, having spent, 2 decades in that space, it's the same stakeholders that you leverage when you're rolling out a new MSP VMS program, with the exception of the billing and invoicing. The AP is not here, which is great because you don't have to scope an entire consolidated invoice for this solution, but it touches the same departments. I just think it's important to stress that it is not at the same level of effort as it takes in rolling out an MSP VMS. So you are still leveraging these key areas so that you can get the program, consumed across the enterprise, but it really does not need a village like the change management and adoption that is required when rolling out an MSP VMS. So I think that's important. And then the second note I want to make is, really the MSP should be a stakeholder on here. And the reason why is that the MSP is, in some of our programs it's our client. You guys, having come from that world, I understand that this can be someone like feel encroaching on your territory. It's not meant to be. It's absolutely a partnership, but you are the stakeholder. You already sit on site. You already run the program. We come in and we are an additional channel, an additional sourcing channel for your program. So the idea is that this would enhance your existing MSP program as an additional access point to talent and all of the other things that come with. So I just wanted to call those 2 things out.
Yeah. To your point, Katie, that you're correct on that. So your MSP needs to be involved. The only small note I want to add to this is that implementing direct sourcing as a sourcing strategy, of course, the MSP will be part of it, but it sometimes could happen. I need to be very, very, very polite here. That that you will switch from one MSP to the other, and a lot of MSPs are providing this solution as part of their total solution. And I would say, from an enterprise perspective, that it's so very close connected to your own brand that you definitely need to be, as an enterprise, in the driver's seat on that. So absolutely, they can bring knowledge, they can bring in technology, but in case you want to swap from one MSP to the other, which is not something I can recommend from an implementation perspective, but in case it happened, then you still want to have your full direct sourcing solution still in place. So it needs to be neutral from that. So then you easily can swap from one, not easily swap, but in case you have to, that you're not need to build up your full direct sourcing strategy with all the IT behind again. That's something I want to touch on, but they definitely have to run the program. It's part of the sourcing strategy. So operationally, the MSP together with the VMS needs to be part of it, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you both, actually. And Katie, I thought that was a really important point. I think we've definitely missed a trick with the matrix here in terms of not including the MSP. And you're quite right, the MSP should be included because the MSP has such a valuable role in this process. And if I think and reflect on direct sourcing, to my mind, folks, everyone wins, right? The MSP wins because there's more volume going through the program, hopefully. Because the suppliers are really good at finding niche candidates or whatever their expertise is, if it's blue collar or white collar or whatever the most polite descriptor of that is. The client wins because they're getting the talent they need ahead of the competition. The candidate wins because they're going to have a better experience when working through a direct sourcing program, one would hope, and that would be our expectation too. And the client has access to a wider pool of talent. If direct sourcing is done well, it breaks down the geographical constraints to hiring, because theoretically, your external talent pool is anywhere, right? And it's also anywhere internally within your organization if you get this right. And I know, Katie, you're going to come on to that towards the end of the slide, but Katie, I just want to touch on something else, if we may, in terms of key stakeholders and some of the obstacles and challenges that you would have faced as a solution provider seeking to design a solution here. Is there any call outs of key stakeholders here that you've come up against that have common concerns, and how best have you dealt with those common concerns that they may have? Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Jan.
Great. Yeah. And I'll touch on that quick, and just so everyone knows, you will get this deck with your template. So because I know we're going to go through the rest fast. It's already half past the hour. Yes, Connor, a couple I want to point out. I know that no one's going to be shocked by this. The middle teal marketing. There is such a, there truly is, I think, an overreaction when people don't understand something. They're instantly going to take a defensive stance. And that is what we've experienced when marketing finds out that this solution is completely centered around the brand. But we also have found that when you educate and you explain how the brand plays a role, that it really is about amplification of your talent brand, and as a reminder, a talent brand within a brand's organization is the social aspect of your brand. This solution is a people solution, which means your talent brand at your enterprise should absolutely grow tenfold if you have this solution. And once we prove it with data and analytics, and how now this solution can measure your brand equity, can really start to measure and take the temperature of your brand performance in the marketplace, all of a sudden you get the chief marketing officer saying, oh my gosh, this is, I totally misunderstood. And we're very thankful about that. So I want to call that out, and you'll learn more and talking points for the business case in a couple of slides. The other piece is, this is best jointly managed by a procurement and talent acquisition stakeholder. The reason I say that is that talent acquisition absolutely needs to have a seat at the table, because this is a solution that builds a private network, a captive audience for your brand. You would think that the talent acquisition stakeholders would have a keen interest in participating in what is going to be the DNA of our enterprise private community. What do we want it to be? How do we want, what type of talent do we want to source and target, and all of those things. So we have found, and Connor, we kind of talked about this on your podcast as well, procurement buys the solution, no doubt, because of the huge benefits from a cost and risk compliance perspective. But talent acquisition is such a critical piece of this. And so to have a unified partnership on the enterprise side between the procurement and talent acquisition stakeholder, that's going to get you a lot further along quicker when you have that relationship intact. So those are the two things I wanted to call out.
Yeah, I think they're spot on. Jan?
Yeah. Just saying about that is that what we have seen, and I've talked about it earlier, Connor. Where is the integrated ATS VMS? Because talent acquisition is also building up talent pools for the employee. And coming back to my earlier statement, which you have very good quoted, is that your employee of today is your freelancer of tomorrow. And they also building up with silver medalists, with your trainee program and everything. You should connect those two talent pools close to each other. They definitely need to have a seat on the table, as Katie said, definitely.
Yeah, I agree with you both. And I think both of you have made really valid points. And Katie, I think part of the stakeholder management, as you said, is getting procurement and talent acquisition / HR to talk. And I think the good news here from our experience and what we're hearing on the marketplace anecdotally is, because of the huge pain and pressure that organizations are going through at the moment, in terms of hiring gaps, hiring needs, winning the war for talent, the talent scarcity battle, whatever the hell you want to call it, those two parts of the organizations are starting to join up and sync up. And I think that can only be a good thing for providers generally in this space, and also in the MSP and total talent world. So I welcome that, and hopefully that will continue, because I think it will make a lot of our jobs a lot easier and more straightforward. So guys, thanks very much for running through the stakeholder matrix. And to Katie's point, we'll be sharing this with our audience. So Katie, I want to hand over to you, because there's some really important critical success factors here that we want to look at in the wider context of building out the business case for direct sourcing. So Katie, over to you.
So starting from the left to the right, I mean, obviously they all of these items, these 7 levers, if you will, they all have a stake in the solution. But if you start at the far left, permission to use the brand, as Connor says, no brand equals no success. I mean, at the end of the day, direct sourcing by definition is enterprises building a new talent channel in the form of a captive talent community after their brand. So, one could argue, if there's no brand, then isn't then the direct sourcing solution operating as a traditional supplier? So brand permission is key. And again, I think that there is a misunderstanding with what the brand and the role it plays and the governance. I can tell you from our solution standpoint, we do not go rogue with a third-party brand. It is the enterprise brand. We operate and represent that brand. And some would argue we probably are more passionate about that brand in the long run, because we have to manage it with kid gloves. So again, there's a lot of justification that you can provide that really, and we'll have information in the business case template so that you can really position that for your executive stakeholders. The seed population strategy. I think that this, in addition to getting permission to use the brand, I feel like the seed population strategy is one of the most important aspects of getting your community off the ground. And what we mean by seed population is, think about when you're building, a network. It doesn't have to be just a talent community. I mean, think about how do you want to populate it? And then once you have it initially populated, what you do from an engagement and marketing perspective is how that will gain momentum, and those types of candidates will then follow. So the seed population is about meeting with talent acquisition, about understanding how, what's the talent strategy of your organization today? What are the key attributes of the people and employees that make up your organization? Describe your culture, describe your key, what would you consider a high performing candidate within each of your job categories? We map all of that, because it's not just about getting the right skills and experience from a candidate perspective, but it's also about making cultural matches across the globe. And, there's a lot of enterprises on here, as I'm looking through the list, that are global organizations, huge enterprises. Who you hire in Poland is going to be different than who you hire in Amsterdam, and possibly completely different than who you hire here in the States. Understanding all of those different attributes of what makes your culture tick is what we want to know, because that's how we build our attraction and engagement strategies on how we're going to then get those candidates interested in your brand, engaging with your brand, and ultimately joining the talent community to be considered for work. So the seed population strategy is a critical piece to that. Referrals. This is, psychology 101. Can't be debated. The number one, for any enterprise, the number one path to their most successful hires is referrals. And that's an age-old fact. So when you think about referrals, it is about like hangs out with like. If Connor Heaney or Jan fit my culture and have been with my company for 10 years, chances are they're probably a cultural match. So if I need more Connors and Jans, I'm going to go to Connor and Jan and ask them for referrals. So this whole talent community concept is built around referrals, because if you can seed your population with cultural matches, and obviously the experience and candidates, the skills required with all of the different types of populations that you're going to invite in, then the logical next step is leverage then your initial seed population for referrals. And now you're going to exponentially grow your community with the same type of cultural matches that you did with your initial seed population. It does not need to be monetized. It could be products. It could be PTO, days off. There are a lot of our clients that are doing a lot of different very interesting things because they want to wait and to kind of be proven before they go all in on monetizing the referral schemes. There's a lot of creative things you can do to incentivize people to want to share their network. So I want to just put that out there, that referral, it's about incentivizing, and you can't believe what people will share their network for. Engagement strategy. This is really important, because your brand is the center of this entire solution. So how are you going to engage with the candidates that you've invited into the network who have then opted in? I want to be clear, no candidate would ever be put into your private network without opting in. So you will always have a fully engaged community because they all opted and chose to be there. Now, the key thing is, how are you going to keep them there? We have candidates in some of our talent networks that we manage that have no intention of ever working for that enterprise, but they happen to be really loyal to that brand. They've heard it's a great place to work, but they're super happy right now in their current role, but they're doing it for a side hustle because, again, they are loyal to the brand and they have lots of friends who need work. And so they're going to be a part of the community so they can refer their network and get paid. So there's a lot of things that happen to really grow out your private communities. The marketing plan comes next, which is, now that you've got your population, you've got permission to use the brand, you've got it initially populated. Now you're starting to go to your initial seed population and leverage them for referrals. You're engaging with them, you're interacting, you're keeping them warm. So now you really have created this warm pond to fish from. Now, let's get strategic about how we're going to market to this population to stay engaged and keep them interested. And then lastly, second to last, fully integrated payroll provider. If you're going to create a white glove, brand loyal, creating ambassadors in the A process from A to Z or A to N to get your community set up, well, you better have a really comprehensive hand-holding experience for the back end of the process as well. I've heard a lot of enterprises that we've talked to who say, love the concept. We've been using this organization right now for our direct sourcing. It's so far so good. The problem is all this work has gone into the front part, which is getting people to join, staying engaged with them, making sure they're referring their networks, all of those things. And then when candidates get selected for their roles, they start going down the payroll provider route, and it's just very clunky. Well, you're creating a candidate experience in this whole rec to check process. So understanding the capabilities of the payroll provider, can they do IC qualifications? Managing risk, very important. And then lastly, meaningful SLAs and KPIs, which we're going to talk about. So I'm going to skip through that. I have a lot of examples for you. So these are kind of the 7 components of got to think about, have to have, and as we know, the data recently says 62% of enterprises are choosing service providers to do this on their behalf. So the service provider who manages the direct sourcing solution should come already with this in their toolkit. But this will be a key part when you see the template for the business case. It'll touch on all of these aspects as they're very important to consider when building your business case.
Thanks, Katie. And Katie, I think there's a beautiful simplicity here in what you've outlined. And I think for our listeners, they'll have an excellent grasp of the key things one needs to consider when you're embarking on this. So that was great, Katie. Thank you so much. Jan, anything to add to this, or any concerns that you've faced or experienced when looking at these critical success factors?
No, I think Katie has touched everything. So I think the only thing I want to add is that it is really, you need to keep that network warm. So you have to maintain it all the time. So just building it up and then leave it, you never will get a talent. You need to, that referral part, the engagement, I think that will be the center of the success of this whole program. Of course, you have to do all the, yeah.
Jan, you mentioned a super important point that I think needs further qualifier. So I'm going to mention it. So Jan just talked about, you've got to keep them warm. You can't just invite them in, they opt in, and then they sit there. Because I would argue, and if there's any talent acquisition people on this call, which I know there are some I see or no one, they will attest to the fact that if you think about talent acquisition departments at enterprises, doesn't matter the size, there just simply is not an army of recruiters that have the time to go and engage with candidates that have come in through your career page because they're interested in a job or they're already brand loyal and want to work for you. They've come in, they've uploaded their resume, they've joined your talent network, yet no one's ever called them. No one's ever even shown that their resume was ever reviewed. So one could argue that you've got hundreds of thousands of candidates that are sitting in a static database. The whole concept of seeding the population in your new dynamic network is that it is dynamic. You're taking a static database today called your HRIS system or whatever platform you're on, and you're inviting them to be a part of your new talent network. And in a talent network, per the direct sourcing solution, that then takes a candidate that becomes one of 100,000 that you may never touch to now being part of a dynamic community that it's someone's job to reach out and touch them. So that is the game changer here.
Yeah, I agree. And Jan, I think some of the problems or challenge I've seen with direct sourcing that was implemented early, and potentially we were guilty of this ourselves in our own organization, is we were bombarding the talent pool with jobs, right? And that isn't good either. And what I've seen in the marketplace is some pretty sophisticated solutions from the likes of Twago about keeping that talent pool warm. They've got affiliate partnerships with Starbucks or Nike, and the people in the talent pool are getting nice warm messages and incentives to stay in the talent pool that are actually non-job related. Now, of course, the obvious point to make is they're in the pool to get a job, right? That goes without saying, right? But it's really about the message that you're sending them and how often. And I think that's the balancing act that some organizations will struggle with and some service providers have struggled with, unfortunately. But anyway, that's the past, but I think it was just worth calling out. So Katie, we've got an extensive amount of slides here. We've got 14 minutes left. Some of the slides you're just going to touch on, and the reason we're going to touch on them, folks, is we just want to share the power of KPIs and data visualization should you wish to embark on a direct sourcing solution with some of the talent technology providers that we're going to reference. But we really want to look at the return on investment and some of the key considerations there. Thanks, Katie.
I think my internet is working better, so I'm going to turn my video on. So like Connor said, we're going to go really fast through this. And again, you guys will get this. But what we wanted to ensure that we impressed upon all of you, and we recognize that some come from MSPs, some are coming from the staffing agency world, and obviously there's a lot of enterprises on this call today. This will appeal to everyone, because I think what's important to understand is if you're an MSP, you're currently on site managing your clients, whole workforce solution, and you're thinking, what would it be like to have a direct sourcing solution tacked on to my program to really add that extra access point to talent? This gives you insight into now what more analytics or what more can you now report on, and what more are you visible to as a result of the solution. Same goes for the enterprises. So again, we're going to go through these very quickly, but I just wanted to give you guys all an idea of, when you come from a world where you're used to measuring vendor performance and how fast you fill jobs through a supply chain, this is a different, the paradigm shift. So right here, what can you do when now you are measuring inventory? So one of the things that Connor and I talk about a lot is the whole absence right now in today's workforce solution of demand planning. And so this from an enterprise level, if all of your hiring managers can go in and do real-time inventory searches on what they think they're going to be using for labor for the next 6 months, or I have a huge IT project coming up, I'm going to need Java developers, a couple business analysts, I need a project manager. You can go into your talent network, because now it's your enterprise has one, and you can literally see what's the makeup of the community, and then also you can set up private pools for each of your managers that have, Jan, you mentioned the super user. Those are super important stakeholders in this whole endeavor, because if you can get, them to understand that this solution now creates them a customized solution to them and their work and what they need to do, it's pretty powerful. So that's your inventory, down to ethnicity, diversity. How do you target underrepresented populations to really drive diversity within your organization? Also, further inventory by global, by country, geography, and skill set. So what's the makeup of the community by each of your key locations across the US on the right side as an example? And in each of those areas that are your key locations, how many IT engineers, marketing, professional, admin, clerical do I have? This is powerful, powerful data that will tell you, well, as a direct sourcing provider, we're the ones that manage inventory. We define where the gaps are, and then we will build marketing strategies to make sure that we never have a gap in the type of resources your enterprise uses. Key performance indicators, as far as now you can measure the recruiting funnel. How many applications as a result of a job, how many people applied, how many people interviewed, did assessments go out, how many hires? So you can drill down into all of these. Your time to fill, this is no longer just about how long it takes in general for a job to get filled, but, now using the community, leveraging referrals, you're going to be shocked at how drastically improved your SLAs are going to get when you have a private captive audience that now is your private community and you have it built the way that we've talked about. Your SLAs are going to be transformed. Turnover, again, it's not just this is also measured in the MSP space, but you can really dig down because there is no layer between the enterprise and the candidates now. So you really have reduced the friction in measuring all of the end candidate data. Community satisfaction, Jan talks about don't put them in there, invite them, and then never touch them again. This is, there's lots of engagement tools that these direct sourcing technology providers have built into their platforms that do on-demand community satisfaction and do lots of different things that really engage on your behalf to make sure that your pond stays definitely stocked full of fish to fish from. Fill rates, how many positions filled, how many, that were received. That's a pretty obvious one. Connor, next slide. This is where this is a totally new concept. And this is the part that just gets me really excited, because I have personally seen some of our new clients, just absolutely, it blows their mind. So now you can manage your brand performance. I mean, you literally can say, okay, based on these marketing campaigns that went out, how familiar is your brand when we first started to now the familiarity with your brand now? Some of the measures are by new people that joined the community that weren't referrals, that weren't part of the initial seed population. That says that someone saw something they liked. That's your brand at work. Your brand popularity, that's referrals 101. And so you can measure that now. Your brand preference, that's about filling jobs. When people take a job for your brand, you're turning, Jan, I love how when he says, your employee today can be your consultant tomorrow. I like to say your candidate today, can be your biggest brand advocate, brand ambassador tomorrow. And that's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
Next slide. And so this just a few more things. And again, just considering your business case, thinking about how you're positioning this to really get to an executive to say, this is a no-brainer. This is why I'm sharing this stuff, because this is the stuff that really blows executives' minds, that you can get all of this from now, this new concept of directly sourcing your contingent or non-FTE labor. So this is, your marketing spend, how many clicks and visits, and this is really about engaging with your brand. You can measure how people engage with the talent brand. And lastly, ROI considerations. So this, we will have a lot of information about this in your toolkit that you will receive, because this is a huge topic that we could probably speak to for hours. In a minute, I will just briefly, and then because I know Jan has some things from a buyer perspective or enterprise perspective. So there's some obvious ones here when you think about return on investment. The reason why we can't give you a calculator, even though I have some calculator options, is because there's not one enterprise that's going to use the same levers to measure their ROI. So what we wanted to do here is just give you the big buckets to consider when you are thinking about how you're going to quantify and do your ROI exercise. Obviously, we're willing to help you as well, Connor, Jan, and myself. But year over year labor spend, I don't know if you guys have got the memo, but direct sourcing, with all of the different levers that it pulls, that is a little bit different, added to an MSP, it's really going to make your MSP, work well, more efficient, but the savings is pretty incredible. Your rate optimization, again, you've cut out a lot of layers when you've put a direct sourcing solution in. So obviously less layers, less, your rates are going to get better. Worker classification, I want Jan to talk to this, but really the argument is, if you're building a private captive network that belongs to your brand and people are joining because of your brand, who's to say you just need to fill contingent roles out of it? How about you fill statement of work projects, or you can fill freelancers, independent contractors? It doesn't discriminate. When you have a captive audience that is built because of you and your brand, why not leverage it for all kinds of things, which we'll highlight. The brand equity, I just showed you some examples of how you can measure your brand equity from a marketing perspective. If you're trying to get a marketing person to approve the use of your brand, you can measure your brand equity. And I've seen with our current solutions how brand equity absolutely is amplified because of a direct sourcing solution. Worker quality, risk is a huge, how are you mitigating risk and can you quantify it? And then labor category expansion, which I just talked about. Jan, it's all you.
Well, there's no grass anymore. So thanks for that. So we're almost on the end of this on this webinar. So, but yeah, from an enterprise perspective, of course, it depends on the angle of or the stakeholder you're on the table with. Is that, of course, you need to have a kind of cost control part. So the work classification is very important because, as said, so it's about one way or the other. So even your freelancer of today will be your employee of tomorrow. So also connecting all the classifications, which is non-employee and employee to start with, so they both can swap between those buckets. That's really important, and that you have the right classification. But it's also about competences. So what kind of competence you're looking for and then it doesn't matter what kind of assignment. It's very related to your brand, as you already said. So if people want to work with you because they love your brand, it's also impacting your hourly rate, because they are willing to negotiate their rate because they want to work with you. So that's all related to each other. So that's the only thing I want to add. So, and seeing this providers, this just a kind of example of, I think this landscape will very, very more huge. So don't be afraid if you're not on this slide and be part of this call. It was just, there are no more space to add some more, because that maybe you want to say something about that, Connor.
No, I think you've covered that, Jan and Katie. Thanks so much, guys. But yeah, we just wanted to highlight some of the providers that we have come across in the market. We know there's other providers out there, but all of us who are participating on the call today, from myself as the host and Katie and Jan-Willem as the speaker, have worked with or evaluated the technologies and the service providers here, or partnered with as well. So we just wanted to leave you, your audience, with some thoughts for consideration. If you're not on the list, drop us a line, and we're happy to get you on the list. As I say, this is for the benefit of our audience, both the enterprise and on the solution side. I really want to thank our two speakers today, guys. That was super helpful, extremely informative, and is no doubt going to be very useful for everyone that attended the call today. As we all mentioned, we'll be putting out a business case template to you all, which will be really helpful as you embark on your direct sourcing journey. So I'd like to finish with thanking our audience today. Thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for staying tuned, and we hope you found it really useful. Thank you, everyone.
And Connor, there's a question in here. Will the presentation and reference toolkit be shared? And the answer is yes, it will be shared early next week. We have all the emails from the registrations, and you guys will all receive that.
Yes, absolutely. And by the way, folks, we're willing to take questions for the next 5 minutes if there is any. So if there is any, please put them on the chat. If not, we've done our job.
Or connect to one of us. Maybe, yeah, if someone wants to connect to us. So maybe the next slide will be some contact details. Yeah.
Thank you.
Don't try to sell your solution, but if from a buyer's perspective, I want to be very Dutch and direct. But if you have any questions on the subject or something, very happy to talk about. So that's why my email is here. But just connecting for selling your solution, I definitely will deny.
Well, thanks for that, Jan-Willem, and thank you, of course, to Katie. Guys, that was fantastic, and all the best, guys. Have a great evening and great day ahead if you're in the Pacific time zone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. Cheers.